Hello, arts management students. I hope you've had a good week, and I hope you're having a good Monday. As we speak right now, Blackboard is down, so I can't show you anything in Blackboard, nor can I grade your discussion stuff. So I apologize for that. I have heard that getting a hold of my textbook is a little complicated. Apparently it wasn't in the bookstore like it was supposed to be, and Amazon's having a little bit of trouble having it if you aren't, if you need it quickly. However, I do want to show you this trick. This is called O'Reilly, O'Reilly.com. If you Google O'Reilly, O-R-E-I-L-L-Y, and then Management and the Arts, you should be able to get access to this page. And this page is literally the book. They have a 30-day free trial, which doesn't require a credit card. So for the first 30 days of the course, you can use this book while you're waiting for your book to come in. I think it's a really good resource, and I encourage you to check it out if you are having trouble getting access to your book. Again, it's O'Reilly, O-R-E-I-L-L-Y.com. Yeah, I think it's a great thing to do. One thing for you to keep in mind is that even if you're unable to read the chapters every month, no, you have a chapter every week. But even if you're unable to read the chapter every week, that you should try to participate in conversation and in discussion. You don't always have to have read the chapter. Sometimes you can just listen to my lecture. But one thing to keep in mind, because this is a web course, I am going to really rely on you to read the book because my lectures aren't going to be 2 hours long, because God forbid I have to sit in a room for 2 hours and talk to myself. That sounds really awful. So just to keep that in mind. So again, that's O'Reilly, O-R-E-I-L-L-Y, and then just search Management and the Arts. You should be able to access the book almost immediately. I know there is also a Kindle version of the book, but if you're not into ebooks, I'm sure that you can order it and get it in the next couple of weeks. Well, within the next 30 days at least. So you can use this until then. All right. Let us talk about the evolving role of arts managers. Very exciting stuff, the evolving role of arts managers. So last week we talked broadly about what an arts manager is and all the different jobs and things that you could do. As an arts manager, we talked about the creative industries. We talked about the how art works, right? We talked about this really great, this beautiful image right here and how all these things work together. We talked about what an organization is. We talked about a manager and how a manager and an organization work together and all of that. So this week we're going to talk about the evolving role of arts managers. We're going to talk about the history of arts managers. We're going to talk about how to make an organization, legally. And we're going to talk about the NEA, which is really made a lot of decisions about the way that arts managers do their job and the way that we define art in the United States. I do want you to bear in mind that as we talk about the history of art, that this is the Western history of art, that our book doesn't talk about the Eastern history of art. We don't go into, Japanese kabuki theater, or we don't talk about African music. This is just the Western history of art, so it's got a very limited perspective on the history of arts managers. One thing to bear in mind is that as long as there has been art, there have been arts managers. So as long as there have been people making art, there have been people helping those artists support themselves and disseminate their work. All right. So the evolving role of arts managers. All right, so arts managers have been a part of a long history of facilitating and supporting arts activities, from the early days of tribal gatherings to sophisticated events staged for a worldwide audience. So whether it was a Greek drama or a medieval church, a sponsored pageant, or getting an audience seated for a no play, people have been carrying out the actions we associate with an arts manager for more than 2,000 years. Like I said, as long as there has been art, there have been arts managers. So just a brief history of arts and arts management. I think some of you are art history majors, so you know in art history we really talk about visual art. So this is, there are in the PDF version of this some really great links to some performing arts timelines. Music, dance, theater, also, yeah, that's it. Music, dance, theater, performing arts in general. There's some really great resources here if you are interested specifically in music. So for example, this starts music in 325, so 325 AD. Constantine declares Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. The spread of Christianity in the Western world has spurred the development of European music. So that tells you that music really started as a Christian activity. In the Western world. Let's just remember that is in the Western world. This is a history of music in the Western world. It's very limited in scope. Great. So as centers of civilization grew, so as we went to cities, so did the functions we associate with the art. So art has always been around. As long as there have been people, there has been art. But as we sort of started to create cities, arts became more centered in this. Arts became more organized as well. So the first examples of performance arts management were the public assemblies associated with religious rites in early societies. So that means that, if your religious rite was musical, based in music or based in dance or based in theater, the priest would be the manager, right? They'd be the one that would decide where you would do it and how many people could come and how you would tell people that it was happening. That's where really arts management started from. State-sponsored arts management started with the Greeks in 534 BC. This is when they started creating Greek drama, which is really where organized performing arts started. So the festivals that they did, they required the management skill. They had to plan, they had to organize, they had to lead, and they had to control. Remember the 4 parts of management: planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. There also were museums in Greek culture. In fact, the word museum actually comes from the Greek word, I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but it means the temple of the muses. So it's where you would go to celebrate the muses. In the Middle Ages, the church becomes more and more important in arts management. The church does a lot of producing of art. They do a lot of patronage, so that means just like paying people to create art. In the 15th and 16th century, complex productions required careful organization for the handling of casts that sometimes included as many as 300 actors. So it's really a time when the church was leading the way as far as what kind of music would be made, what kind of art would be made. It was all very Christian in nature. That's not to say that people who weren't Christian weren't making art. It was just in the history of Western art, this is what was the primary. So one thing to remember is that as long as there has been culture, there has been counterculture or other kinds of culture. So don't take this as fact as the only history of art that exists. So the Renaissance is when the arts had a dramatic resurgence, not resurgence because they didn't go away, but when the arts were able to do a lot of expansion and there's a lot of art happening. This is when a lot of opera was made. 17th through the 19th century, art starts to flourish. It comes to America. Playwrights, directors, composers, musicians, dancers, and singers found work in newly created companies and institutions. In France, they were creating ballet companies. Germany established a state theater in 1767. So there's a lot of really great stuff going on. So as time goes on, it becomes more and more organized for arts managers. There become more and more organized ways for people to do art. And within that, you as an arts manager would have to be more organized, right? In the 20th century, we've continued to grow our arts. After World War II, there was a lot of art and history that was destroyed during those wars. We created some laws that are in place in The Hague that sort of protect our history and protect our culture. The Broadway system began to be used, and then in the 60s and 70s, dance started becoming bigger. So yeah, that's kind of the history. That's a really brief history of art. Just what you need to know is that as long as there has been art, there have been arts managers, and as long as there have been people, there has been art. So that is the important thing to know. So arts service organizations are organizations who exist solely to serve other organizations. Other arts organizations, sorry. So the Houston Arts Alliance, where I work, is an arts service organization. Our audience is artists and arts organizations and cultural organizations. Fresh Arts is an arts service organization in the city of Houston. Their mission has to do with individual artists. So this is a list of national arts service organizations that are focused on these particular types of art. All right, so here's the fun part, right? Forming an arts organization. So some of this is going to get kind of thick, right? So some of this is law stuff, some of it's government stuff, some of it's tax stuff. So it's all going to be kind of complicated. But here's the sort of the way that you do it. If you look on page 43 of your book, and I'll show you. Over here. Hey! If you look on page 43 of your book, there is writing a business plan, business model for an arts organization, right? An arts organization. And this is really where you want to start if you're starting an organization. So you'll have a title page, a table of contents, executive summary. You never want to start an organization without a business plan. You have to figure out how you're going to create a sustainable sort of organization. That's something that we as artists tend to forget about is, how are we going to keep this thing running forever? We just want to make art, right? But you really need to think about it from a business perspective of how are you going to make money? How are you going to give back? How are you going to, what's your income? What's your output? How's it all work together, right? For those of you who are business majors, you'll recognize a business plan. No, I didn't want to do that. There we go. All right. So in order to incorporate, the incorporation process is complicated, but I'm just going to read a couple of things to you from the book. The major reason why an individual or group of people may decide to legally incorporate is to provide protection for the people who operate the business. Without the protection of incorporation, the owners are legally responsible for all debts incurred and may be sued personally. So for example, if you are selling art and your art doesn't meet the qualifications of the person that you're selling it to, they could legitimately sue you if you're not incorporated for everything that you're worth. Filing for incorporation is usually covered under the operational procedures established by the Secretary of State. So it's different in every state. But when you incorporate, the state bestows upon the organization the legal right to operate. So what that means is that when you incorporate, you have an entity other than yourself that is doing business. So there's another legal entity instead of yourself. So if someone were to sue an organization, then they could only sue for what the organization is worth, not what you're worth. So for example, I have a job, I have a day job, and then I also have a business. If someone were to sue my business right now because I'm not incorporated, they could get the money from my day job. But if I were to incorporate my business, then they could only get the money from the business. So that is why you would want to incorporate. Every Secretary of State website has the incorporation rules and the fees. They're different for every state. So this is what you need to have in order to incorporate as a nonprofit. You need a name, and we'll talk about this in just a little bit, but you have to check the name against the Secretary of State to make sure there's no other organizations like that. You'll need the purpose or purposes of the organization. You'll need the scope of activities. You'll need membership provisions. So if you're going to have a membership organization, how do you become a member? How much does it cost? What does that mean? You'll need the name of the person registering the incorporation and the place of business. So you'll need to make sure that the address that you're using for your business is able to be used as an address. You'll also need the names and addresses of the incorporators and the initial board of directors. So we'll talk about the 501c3 process in just a second. But in order to become a nonprofit, a 501c3 organization, you have to have a board of directors that is at least 3 people. So you'll need the names and addresses of all of those people. And then you'll need to know how the assets will be distributed when the corporation is dissolved. So if you were to close your business after you open it, what happens to the things that the business owns? There are also, so filing for tax exemption is a whole other process. So first you have to incorporate, and then you can file for tax exemption. You have other options besides tax exemption. You can do a limited liability corporation, an LLC, or a low profit limited liability corporation, which is an L3C. It just depends on how much power you really want to have over your organization. So an LLC is what you would do if you were going to start a for-profit business. You don't need a board of directors for a for-profit business. You only need one person. Yes. You can go to www.forminganllcguide.com if you are interested in forming an LLC for your business. And you can also just Wikipedia the letters L3C, which we kind of call a B Corp now. There's a lot of interesting business models. If you're interested in business models in the arts and nonprofit industry, hit me up. Sorry, I'll try not to be cool. I apologize. All right, so creating a not-for-profit business. Not-for-profit. So that means that nobody owns it, and any profits of the organization go back into the organization, right? That's what most arts organizations are. So first, you have to, there's a whole process, www.irs.gov. Charities and nonprofits. It just takes you through the whole thing. Internal revenues is recognized. You must be organized as a trust, a corporation, or an association. So incorporation is how you become a corporation. So forth and so on. It will walk you through this process really easily. So this is something that's really important. Apparently my cat has very strong opinions about incorporation. So this is important. I'm going to read this to you verbatim. The exempt purposes set forth in section 501c3 of the IRS code are charitable, religious, education, scientific, literary, testing for public safety, fostering national or international amateur sports, and preventing cruelty to children or animals. So, think about that. You can only be in one of those categories. So which category do you think arts organizations generally fall under? Take a moment to think about that. Which category? So your categories are charitable, religious, educational, scientific, literary, testing for public safety, fostering national or international amateur sports competition, and preventing cruelty to animals. Which one do you think it is? Most arts organizations, in fact all arts organizations, qualify for 501c3 status under the educational aspect of the 501c3 code. The second part of the code says the term charitable is used in its generally accepted legal sense and includes relief to the poor, relief of the poor, the distressed, or the underprivileged, advancement of religion, so yeah, advancement of education or science, erecting or maintaining public buildings, monuments, or works, so that's kind of art as well, lessening the burdens of government, lessening neighborhood tensions, eliminating prejudice and discrimination, defending human and civil rights secured by law, and combating community deterioration and juvenile delinquency. Those are all other ways that you could qualify for your 501c3 tax exemption. That is how you do it. Very exciting, not boring at all stuff, as you can see. All right, so arts and culture, like I said, typically file under the educational exempt purpose. There's no specific designation for filing as an arts organization. Some other things that you have to have in order to start a business, whether nonprofit or for-profit, is a business plan and bylaws. I showed you on page 43 what the business plan looks like. It's a great framework if you're really interested in starting a business. And bylaws are the formal rules by which the organization will be operated. Page 48 sort of talks about, exactly what goes into bylaws. So yeah. All right. So an arts manager needs to understand the incorporation process, the filing steps, and if requesting tax-exempt status, the requirements for successfully completing the application. Because when it comes to creating a sustainable organization, nonprofit incorporation does not mean the arts organization will make no profit. In fact, the business plan should be created estimating income to support from ticket sales or admissions, gifts and grants from board members, but it is based on the assumption that an arts management needs to have a wide range of knowledge, skills, and abilities. So what does that look like, right? So if you're a nonprofit, it doesn't mean you're not going to make money. It doesn't mean you're going to do things for free. It means you just need to know what to do with the money once you have it. Many people who hold management and leadership positions in the arts were first artists, performers, directors, designers, stage managers. That's what I was. I was a stage manager. Or they come from an entirely different field. And many people learn to be an arts manager by doing the job with little or no training. The artist manager or the manager artist can be a very fluid field of employment. There are no entrance requirements or published employment standards or certifications required to become a quote-unquote arts manager. You can just call yourself an arts manager if you're managing art in any way. In fact, anyone can be designated a manager in a vast number of work settings around the world. And managing is a practice. It's learned primarily through experience, and it's rooted in context. So how does this translate into the title of arts manager? If we know that there is a fluid back and forth between artist and manager within the arts management field, how does all of that information about managing as a practice learned primarily through experience and rooted in context, what does that mean? So the key areas in which an arts manager works are, or can be, this is one definition, planning and development, marketing and public relations, personnel management, fiscal management, board relations, labor relations, government relations, and advocacy. These are the functions that you need to acquire in order to be effective. You need to have a little bit of knowledge in all of them, and then as your career goes on, you will become more specialized in one of these, and that will be your specialization. So look, the growth of arts and culture management undergraduate and graduate programs worldwide has helped prepare managers for the growing field. So this is a field that's growing. A lot of people are becoming arts managers, myself included. It's a really great place to be right now. So despite the increase in the number of college graduates with advanced degrees in the field of arts management, there are still a great many people working as arts management with on-the-job training and who have some professional training when it's available. So that means that there's still a lot of people out there who are running arts organizations who have never taken an arts management class. They've never taken a budgeting, they don't understand budgeting, they don't understand exactly how fundraising works. This happens a lot. What you'll also see in a lot of organizations is that big organizations, the CEO will have an MBA, so a Master's of Business Administration instead of an arts management degree. They're similar. I like to say that I have an MBA in nonprofit arts, just when people are curious about what my degree means. It just means that I have a little bit more specialization in exactly what an arts and cultural organization needs and exactly what a nonprofit organization needs, whereas an MBA is more focused on a for-profit organization. So, women arts managers, they've increased a lot over the decades, and more women are moving into executive level positions that used to be dominated by men. Gender inequities in women's salaries often mirror those of the private sector. So the same sort of gender wage gap that exists in other sectors exists in the arts management sector. All right, so let's talk about the NEA. The NEA is the National Endowment for the Arts. It was founded in 1965, and it has been really helpful in enhancing the status and importance of having effective arts managers working on your team. The impact of the NEA has been felt across the nation, and particularly in state and local arts agencies. So, the impact of introducing the NEA to the arts and culture community in the U.S. can't be underestimated. You can't say that Burns, who wrote this book, isn't an exaggerator, right? So it's helped to foster a culture of better management, more accountability, and improved fiscal practices in arts organizations. So the NEA does ongoing research, publication, and national funding initiatives designed to change the public dynamic of how people interacted with the arts. So before, everybody sort of existed in silos, and the NEA said, no, we can't exist in silos. We're going to be an industry. We're going to all work together. We're going to have standards for how an organization should be run. We're going to be able to talk to our donors and say, this is what we're doing. This is our impact. This is how we're using your money. They did some matching grants, which stimulated giving and greatly expanded the fundraising effectiveness of arts organizations. And the NEA, while not without its problems, it still promotes active dialogue about art, artists, arts education, and so forth. It's a really great thing. So the NEA has been very instrumental in changing the way that we think about arts management. All right, so that is the end of the lecture. I didn't even touch on really everything that's in the book. I really don't think you could even answer the questions in the book, the discussion questions. They're like, summarize the major arts management activity associated with the following periods. So you do really need to read the book to catch up and to answer these questions. And I'm looking forward to reading your discussion answers. I'm sorry I couldn't read them before I recorded this video, but maybe it'll be up by the time I'm done uploading this to YouTube. So as always, I'm here if you need anything. and I would love feedback. Again, it's really weird to just sit alone in a room and talk to yourself for half an hour. We got to figure out a way for this to be interactive. If you have any ideas, I'm open to them. Otherwise, have a great week, and I'll see you on the message boards.